She was just 6 years old, curled up alone in a freezing alley behind a boarded-up laundromat. No coat, no parents. Just a faded blue quilt dotted with golden stars, the only thing she had left that still smelled like home. The wind in Flagstaff, Arizona wasn't just cold that night. It had teeth. It howled through the alleyways like a ghost looking for someone to haunt. Christmas had passed. The lights downtown were dark. The streets were empty. The cold had settled in like a final sentence. Lark Bennett didn't cry anymore. That had stopped weeks ago. Her cheeks were raw from the wind. Her lips were split and bleeding. Her small body wrapped tight in the blanket her mom had sewn for her, back when birthdays came with cake and lullabies, not silence and hunger. But that night something changed. A sound faint, almost lost in the wind. Not human, a whimper. She lifted her head. Her breath fogged the air like smoke. Her gray eyes, dulled by days of survival, sharpened. The noise came again. Near the dumpster, a shape, bigger than a cat, unmoving. Lark hesitated, then crept forward. What she saw made her forget the cold for the first time in days. A dog. But not just a dog, a German shepherd, massive and broken, his fur matted with ice and dirt, his ribs pushing through his sides like bones in a cage. He didn't growl. He didn't flinch. He just looked at her with eyes full of something she understood too well. Despair. Lark looked down at her blanket, her only warmth, her only memory. Her fingers clenched the edges. Then she knelt beside the dying animal and without a word draped it over him. That simple act, a child giving up her only comfort to save a creature with no voice, was the moment the universe shifted. And if you believe in second chances, if you believe stories like this matter, don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals, where we tell the stories the world needs to hear. She sat beside the dog in silence. His body trembled, but when she leaned gently against him, his breathing steadied. She felt it. Warmth. Shared warmth. A fragile bond born from two broken things that had found each other in the cold. Miles away in a cabin deep in the forest north of Buffalo Park, a woman stirred. Clara Whitmore, age 59, wasn't easily shaken. Once the top K-9 search and rescue trainer in the state, she'd now traded missions for solitude. Her home was quiet, her heart even quieter. Every December she came back to that house. Not for the snow, not for peace, but for guilt. Her sister June had vanished after a fire in Phoenix 7 years earlier. They hadn't spoken since the fight, and Clara had never met her niece. She didn't know where the child ended up, didn't know her name, only that she existed once. And yet, that night Clara couldn't read, couldn't sleep. Something in her bones told her the same instinct she'd followed into burning buildings and wilderness searches. Something was out there. Something had begun. Back on LaRue Street, the snow had started to fall again. Lark stayed awake, watching the shepherd's chest rise and fall. Her fingers brushed through his frozen fur. "You need a name," she whispered. She hadn't spoken aloud in weeks. Her voice surprised her. The dog didn't react, just stared. "Maybe Ash," she said, eyes drifting to the steam of their shared breath. Like what's left after fire, but still warm. The name fit. The wind screamed through the alley like a train of ghosts, but they didn't move. No angels descended, no sirens wailed, just a child and a dog. Alone, but not. When dawn came, the city didn't notice. The rail yard was quiet, coated in frost. Lark blinked the sleep from her eyes. Her body ached, not just from the cold, but from the stillness of having slept wrapped around another soul. Ash was still breathing, slower, steadier. They needed food, water, help. She left him only after tucking the blanket carefully around him. Her legs wobbled beneath her. Her stomach growled so loud it echoed off the walls. But she walked. Downtown Flagstaff woke slowly. Commuters with gloved hands and hot coffees moved past without looking. Lark found a spot near the old station, sat cross-legged beneath a defunct ticket booth, and tried not to disappear. She had no sign, no violin, no dog by her side. Only a voice. And so she sang, "You Are My Sunshine." Her mother had sung it folding laundry. Her father had hummed it while brushing cinders from her hair the night everything changed. The melody wobbled, her voice cracked, but it was enough. Ash arrived quietly. She hadn't seen him follow. But there he was, limping, blanket still on his back, pressing himself next to her like he was born to guard her. Together they became more than a homeless girl. They became a story. A businessman passed. Ash let out a soft whine. The man stopped, looked, dropped a folded $5 bill at her feet. No words. It worked. In 3 hours, they had $16 a protein bar and a flicker of something Lark hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Across the street in the upstairs window of a cafe, Clara Whitmore stood frozen with a coffee in her hand. She had driven into town on instinct. That old searcher's pull. She saw the dog first, the way he moved, the way he watched. Not like a stray, like a soldier. Her breath caught. Her heart whispered a name she hadn't said aloud in months. Shadow. Her best dog, lost in a fire, declared dead. But nothing about the way the shepherd moved, the posture, the positioning, the protective lean was random. It was training. And if she was right, the girl beside him, her hair, her eyes, Clara couldn't be sure. But the pieces. Later that day, Lark and Ash shared a sandwich on the station steps. She gave him the turkey, kept the bread. Her voice was gone now, raspy from cold, from singing, from emotion. She didn't see the woman across the street watching, taking notes, recognizing something no one else could see. And somewhere deep in her chest, Clara Whitmore, once the best search and rescue commander in the state of Arizona, felt the mission begin again. Not for a lost hiker, but for two souls who had just found each other. By the time the sun dipped low behind the pines, the warmth from earlier had vanished like it never existed. Flagstaff turned cold fast, not just the air, but the kind of cold that settled deep in your bones. Lark walked with a paper bag clutched tight to her chest. Inside, 2 breakfast burritos, a half-empty bottle of water, and a few coins that clinked with each step. Ash limped beside her ears, alert, the star-covered quilt, still wrapped loosely across his back like a makeshift cape. She didn't know where they were going. Not exactly, but her feet remembered the way. Back behind the shuttered bike shop, the one with the sagging awning that at least kept the snow off, she paused. Ash sniffed the air, then stepped forward, first checking the alley like a soldier on patrol. It wasn't safe. Nowhere was, but it was quiet. That night, Lark gave Ash half of one burrito. He took it with a gentleness that didn't match his size. He didn't gobble or growl. He chewed slowly like someone who'd once been taught patience. Lark didn't speak, not since the song. But the silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was shared. 3 blocks away, Clara Whitmore moved with purpose. Her long wool coat whipped around her as she cut across the sidewalk, eyes scanning alleys, porches, back streets. That dog, the way he moved, it couldn't be coincidence. Shadow had been declared lost in a fire nearly 8 months ago. A search and rescue shepherd trained to go where people couldn't. Clara had trained him herself from his first bark to his final mission. That fire had taken more than her best K9. It had taken her heart. Until now. Back in the alley, Lark had just started to doze off when she heard it. A scrape. Metal on concrete. Her body stiffened. Her hand moved instinctively to Ash's shoulder. He was already alert. Then came the voice. Well, what do we have here? 3 figures blocked the alley's only exit. Teenagers, maybe early 20s, faces hollow, shoulders hunched from cold. The tallest one had a scar that ran across his eyebrow, like a question no one wanted to answer. He flipped a small blade between his fingers. Pretty good haul today, huh? He sneered, nodding at the bag in Lark's arms. Ash rose. No bark, no lunge. Just a low, quiet growl that built like thunder. The second boy stepped forward. Call off your mutt. We just want to talk. Lark backed into the wall. Her fingers clenched the quilt tighter. She didn't speak. Couldn't. The third boy stayed back, hands in his pockets. Just hand over the bag, girl. Then we're gone. She shook her head. Scar eyebrows sighed. Your choice. He raised the knife. Ash didn't wait. In a flash of motion, the shepherd lunged, his jaws clamped around the wrist holding the blade. The boy screamed as the knife clattered to the ground. Ash twisted, dragging him off balance. The second boy kicked hard, his boot slammed into Ash's ribs. Lark screamed, a choke sound that barely escaped her throat. Ash didn't let go. Instead, he used the momentum to slam the attacker into the brick wall. The third one hesitated, eyes wide with fear. This ain't worth it, he shouted. Let's go. They ran. Ash staggered. His body wobbled for the first time since she'd met him. He limped toward her, then collapsed to one elbow, panting. Lark dropped beside him. Her hands hovered, unsure where to touch. His ribs rose and fell like he was running out of time. She cried, not from fear, but because she couldn't lose him too. 5 minutes later, footsteps echoed down the alley. Clara froze when she saw them, a little girl in a star-covered blanket, kneeling beside a collapsed shepherd. Even from 20 feet away, she knew that dog's posture, that body, that tail. Ash, or maybe Shadow. She approached slowly. I saw what happened, Clara said gently. I'm not here to hurt you. The girl didn't move. The dog is injured, she added. I can help him. I've trained dogs like him my whole life. Ash lifted his head, sniffed the air toward Clara. His eyes flickered. Not a growl, not a warning. Recognition. I'm Clara, she said, crouching. Do you have a name? Nothing, but the girl's grip on the quilt eased. You can come with me, Clara offered. Just for tonight. Somewhere warm, for both of you. Lark looked down at Ash. His eyes were closed again. One paw twitched. She looked back at Clara, who waited, not pushing, not pleading. Just there. Lark nodded. Clara's truck rattled up the snowy mountain road like a stubborn old dog. Lark sat stiffly in the passenger seat, the quilt wrapped around her like armor. Ash lay on a pile of blankets in the back, his breathing shallow but steady. They drove in silence. Clara didn't ask questions, she just drove. Up past the ridge, past the blackened pine trees from a fire 10 years earlier, toward a farmhouse that waited like an old memory. Lights glowed from the porch. A kennel building stood behind the house, long and low. Fenced run sat empty and still in the snow. Inside, warmth hit Lark like a wave. Clara carried Ash herself, one arm beneath his legs, the other cradling his chest. Lighter than he should be, she murmured. Not good. She led Lark to a mudroom with thick rugs and a folded cot. A dog bed waited in the corner. He'll be okay tonight, Clara said softly, laying Ash down. We'll get him checked in the morning. Lark sat beside him. Bathroom's through there. I'll leave clean clothes outside. Then Clara stepped out, closing the door almost all the way, but not locking it, never locking it. In the hallway, Clara leaned against the frame and exhaled. She didn't know the girl's name. She didn't know why the dog looked and moved like shadow. But she knew this mattered. They weren't just strays. They were survivors. She picked up the phone and dialed. Samantha, I need a favor. Big one. No questions yet. A dog German Shepherd. Possible rib trauma. Maybe internal bruising. Got it, came the voice. What about the girl? She hasn't said a word. A pause. Clara, are you? I'm not adopting anyone, Clara said quickly. I just need them to make it through the night. Fine, I'll be there at 7. Back in the mudroom, Lark rested her head on Ash's shoulder. She remembered her mother's voice, you're my little Lark. One day you'll fly again. That day had never come. Not until now. The fire's glow flickered across the hardwood floor, casting shadows that danced along the walls like quiet memories. Lark sat cross-legged in the mudroom, her back against the wall. The warmth from the stove slowly seeping through the thick rugs beneath her. She hadn't left Ash's side all night. He was still sleeping. His breathing, once ragged, now had rhythm. His body, wounded, worn down, was beginning to let go of the panic. One paw twitched as if he were dreaming of someplace safer. Maybe in that moment he already knew they were closer. The door creaked open behind her. A woman entered, not with a smile, but with the kind of presence that didn't need one. Tall, mid-40s, her dark brown hair pulled into a loose bun under a knit cap. She didn't announce herself, didn't ask questions, just nodded once. I'm Sam, she said quietly. Dr. Samantha Lantho, Clara called. She didn't crouch down or coo or try to make herself smaller. She moved with calm efficiency, like someone who had walked into plenty of crisis moments before this one. Sam knelt beside Ash and began her examination. No theatrics, no commentary. Just precise hands, steady breath, and quiet murmurs Lark didn't quite understand. He's lucky, Sam said at last, glancing at Clara, who stood in the doorway. Some bruising, possibly a couple cracked ribs. Nothing internal that I can tell. Could have been way worse. He fought someone, Clara added. Sam's eyes narrowed, didn't whimper once. That's not instinct, that's training. Then she paused. You still think he's Shadow? I'm starting to, Clara answered, but her eyes were on Lark. Sam prepped a small syringe and filled it with antibiotics. He'll need time, rest, real food, painkillers for a few days. Lark reached out slowly. Her hand landed softly on Ash's paw. The dog stirred, opened one eye, released a slow content breath. Sam paused. The girl, has she said anything yet? Clara shook her head. Not yet. Later that day, Clara brought down a tray with soup crackers and a mug of warm broth. Ash lapped gently from a stainless steel bowl. Lark stayed by his side, the quilt still wrapped around her like armor. Clara knelt nearby, not too close. The air smelled faintly of chamomile. You know, Clara said quietly, I had a sister once. Lark's eyes shifted. She blinked but didn't speak. Her name was June. She had your red hair and your stubborn eyes. Still nothing, just the soft rustle of the blanket. We had a fight, a big one. Then, I lost her. Didn't know what happened. Not until I saw you in that alley. Clara's voice faltered. You remind me of her and of someone else. She glanced down at Ash. There was a dog like him. Shadow. One of the best I ever trained. He was lost in a fire last year. No body, no trace. Just gone. Lark looked up. Her lips pressed together like she was trying to keep something inside from breaking free. I don't know what your story is, Clara added. You don't have to tell it, not now. But I want you to know you're safe here. She stood. Come upstairs when you're ready. Then she left the door open behind her. That evening, Lark finally emerged from the mudroom. She stepped into the hallway, her socked feet making no sound on the wood floor. The house smelled like pine and old coffee. She followed the scent and found Clara kneeling beside the stove, feeding in a fresh log. Clara had changed into jeans and an old Arizona State sweatshirt. Her hair, usually tied back, now fell loosely past her shoulders, streaked silver under the firelight. She didn't look like a rescuer anymore. She looked like someone who had once needed saving. Clara heard her and turned. Would you like to help me feed the others? Lark didn't speak, but she didn't turn away either. That was enough. Out behind the house, the kennel lights buzzed softly under a fresh layer of snow. Clara handed Lark a scoop and pointed to the bowls. 4 dogs waited, 2 old Labrador retrievers, 1 aging golden with cloudy eyes, and a young hound with 1 ear that never quite stood up. Lark moved slowly, scooping kibble with cautious hands. The dogs didn't bark or rush her. They just waited. Even the anxious hound sat quietly, letting her run a hand down his neck. Clara watched from the doorway, her arms crossed but her heart slowly unfolding. That night before bed, Lark stood by the guest room window. Her hand rested on the frosty glass. The nightlight glowed soft yellow behind her, shaped like a crescent moon. I lost my mom, she said suddenly. Clara stopped at the doorway. I lost her in a fire, Lark continued, her voice thin and cracking but steady. I couldn't find her. I tried. She turned slowly. Ash found me. He pushed me out the fire escape. He stayed. Clara stepped into the room, heart pounding. I don't think he was just a dog, Lark whispered. I think he came back. Her eyes shining not from tears but from belief locked with Clara's. He came back to find me. Clara moved closer, barely breathing. Then we'll make sure he stays. Over the next few days, something shifted. It wasn't fast, it wasn't easy, but it was real. Lark stopped flinching at footsteps. She started sleeping with her shoes off. She brushed her own hair in the morning and fed the dogs without being asked. She learned which bowl belonged to which dog. She measured out joint supplements for the older ones, added warm water to soften food for the hound with dental issues. Ash followed her like a shadow. His limp faded. His coat began to shine. The scar on his side, once hidden beneath dirt and blood, now looked more like a badge. One morning at breakfast, Clara slid a worn Polaroid across the table. Lark stared at it. A younger version of Clara, smiling, held a newborn in one arm and a shepherd puppy in the other. Behind her stood a woman with long red hair and an open grin. That's your mom, Clara said. She didn't explain how she knew. Lark didn't ask. The silence between them wasn't silence anymore. It was memory, and the beginning of something more. That afternoon, Clara's phone buzzed. She stepped into the barn to take the call. When she returned, her face was tight, voice low. There's a power warning in town, she said. Transformer lines are freezing. If we lose electricity tonight, the kennel temps could drop dangerously low. Lark stood by the fireplace, one hand on Ash's head. I moved the older dogs into the training center, Clara continued. It's better insulated, has a backup propane heater. Lark nodded. But I need to check the lower corridor. It hasn't been used since fall. I can help, Lark said. Clara looked up stunned. The first time Lark had volunteered anything? You sure they couldn't worm? Shardy too. A silent nod. Ash rose beside her. The training center sat low along the hill, wind clawing at its roof like something alive. Inside, the main lights flickered weakly. Generators were failing. They moved down the hallway, Clara in one direction, Lark and Ash in another. The lower corridor was darker, colder. Lark scanned each stall with her flashlight. Bedding, toys, dust. Then she saw an overhead vent clogged with snow and ice. She reached up, and then it happened. A roar, not fire, but something close. An electrical surge snapped behind the wall. Then sparks, then flames. Get out now, Clara screamed. The heater had shorted. Flames licked the rafters, climbed fast. Lark dropped low, choking on smoke. Ash, help me. The dog nudged her toward the crawl exit Clara had built years ago after a similar scare, a narrow hatch behind feed bags. But Lark stopped. She heard barking. 3 dogs still inside. Too old, too scared to run. I won't leave them, she whispered. Ash didn't push again. He waited, then turned. Together they went back. Outside, Clara tried to re-enter the building, but flames were pouring from the roof. She screamed their names into the fire, then a shout, and a shape. The small hatch burst open at the side of the hill. Ash leapt out first. Then 3 dogs, one limping, one coughing, one tangled in Lark's arms. Then Lark, covered in soot, her sweater scorched, but her eyes alive. Clara dropped to her knees, wrapped her arms around her, and whispered, "You little fool." "I couldn't leave them," Lark said. "I know," Clara breathed. "That's exactly why you'll never be alone again." Ash pressed against them both. Not just a dog, not just a girl, a family. The snow hadn't stopped for days. It came down in thick silence, blanketing everything like a lullaby the sky had forgotten how to sing. But inside the farmhouse, life was slowly stirring back to color. Lark stood barefoot on the wooden floor, a mug of cocoa warming her hands. Her red hair was still tangled from sleep, but it caught the morning light like fire through frost. Ash lay stretched across the hearth rug, his tail thudding softly whenever she passed near. His limp was barely noticeable now, a shadow of a shadow. Clara watched from the kitchen, her hand wrapped around a chipped mug of black coffee. She hadn't said much since the fire, partly because Lark hadn't needed her to, and partly because sometimes the most important things come in silence. But today felt different. Today, Lark moved like she belonged. She had started checking on the dogs without being asked. She knew which of the older labs needed softer food, and that the hound, the one with the crooked ear, liked his blanket fluffed before he curled up. She wasn't just helping, she was leading. And Ash, he followed her like he remembered every command he was ever given. Clara couldn't shake the feeling. The lean, the posture, the soft huff of breath before entering a room, a signal. Shadow had always done that. Clara hadn't said it aloud. Not yet. But the question pulsed beneath her ribs with every step the dog took. Could it really be him? After breakfast, Lark and Clara sat at the table across from one another. The old wood creaked beneath their mugs. The fire popped softly behind them. Clara reached into a drawer and pulled out a worn envelope. She slid it across the table. "I kept this," she said. Didn't know why at the time. Lark opened it slowly. Inside was a photo, a Polaroid, faded and bent at the corners. Her mother, June, laughing, hair windblown, holding a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. Beside her stood Clara, younger but unmistakable. And between them, a German Shepherd puppy, barely bigger than a football. "That's you," Clara said gently. "And him. I gave June the pup when she moved to Phoenix. She named him Ash." Lark's hands trembled. "That's not just any dog, is it?" Clara asked. Lark nodded slowly. "I thought he was gone," she whispered. "In the fire. I never saw him again. I thought..." Tears welled but didn't fall. "I thought I was the only one who made it out." Clara's voice cracked. "You weren't." That afternoon, a truck pulled into the long drive, tires crunching over ice. The vet doctor, Sam Lantho, stepped out with her usual briskness, brushing snow off her coat and hauling a box of supplies under one arm. She didn't need to knock. "You've got yourself a miracle case," she said, setting down the box. "That dog's healing faster than most healthy ones would." Clara nodded. "He's got a reason now." Sam studied Lark from across the room. The girl had changed. Her posture was stronger. Her eyes didn't dart. Her fingers no longer gripped the edges of the table like she was waiting for it to vanish. Sam turned to Ash, who rolled over and let her check his side. "You know it's rare," Sam said, glancing at Clara, "but not impossible. Dogs find their way back, especially the trained ones." "He found her," Clara said, "across cities, through snow, after nearly dying." Sam looked up. "Then maybe it's time to stop calling it a coincidence." That night, Lark helped Clara brush down the dogs before bedtime. The kennel lights cast long shadows and their footsteps echoed in the quiet. As they finished, Clara turned to her. "You ever thought about staying?" Lark froze. Clara didn't rush her. She just kept brushing the golden retriever's coat slow and steady. "I mean," she added, "not just for the winter, but for real." Lark stared at her shoes. "I've been in 7 group homes," she said finally. "I never lasted more than a few weeks." "This isn't a group home," Clara replied. Lark was quiet. "Would I have to go back to school?" she asked, almost like it was a trap. "Eventually, yeah," Clara said, "but one step at a time." "What if I mess up?" Lark's voice cracked. "What if you get tired of me?" Clara turned, setting the brush down. "I won't," she said simply. "We don't throw people away here, not the dogs, not you." Ash, as if understanding, came to her side and pressed his head against her knee. Lark didn't answer, but for the first time she smiled. The next morning brought something unexpected. Mail. A letter, addressed to Lark Bennett, CO Clara Whitmore. Inside was a document, Not legal, not formal. Just a handwritten note. It read, "Dear Lark, if this finds you, it means you survived, and I'm so proud of you. I don't know what your journey looked like or who helped you along the way, but I prayed someone would. You were always strong, even as a baby. You held your bottle like a warrior. If you're reading this with Ash by your side, then maybe, just maybe he found you after all. Be brave, be kind, and trust the ones who stay. Love always. Mom, Namanawakina." Lark folded the letter and tucked it into her hoodie. She didn't say anything, just walked out to the yard and sat in the snow with Ash curled beside her. They stayed there for hours. Later that week, Clara opened a drawer and pulled out a dusty file. It contained Shadow's training logs, bite patterns, posture commands, track and trail data. She spread them across the table and watched as Lark ran her finger down one of the charts. Ash sat nearby. "Can I try something?" Lark asked. Clara nodded. Lark stood, made a small circle with her fingers, and pointed forward. Ash didn't move. She repeated it, firmer. Ash stood, walked to the exact point on the floor, sat. Clara's mouth opened. "That's advanced," she said quietly. "That wasn't just instinct." Lark turned. He remembers. That night, Clara sat by the window watching the wind chase flakes across the glass. Lark lay curled on the couch, her feet tucked under a blanket. Ash dozed nearby, breathing steady, a protector, even in sleep. The house didn't feel quiet anymore. It felt full of noise that didn't have to be spoken, full of healing that didn't need a timeline, full of people and dogs who had chosen one another, not by blood, but by bond. Clara glanced at the Polaroid still sitting on the table. June, Lark, and a puppy named Ash, lost in a fire, but somehow, all still here. The air felt lighter that morning, not warmer. Flagstaff was still gripped by January's sharp chill, but lighter, like something heavy had quietly slipped off the house in the night. Lark stood on the back porch with a fleece-lined jacket, zipped tight, a thermos of hot chocolate in her hands. Ash sat beside her, tail sweeping slow arcs across the frozen wood. His ears perked as they listened to nothing in particular, just the wind in the trees and the occasional call of a crow overhead. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Clara watched from inside the kitchen window, arms crossed, coffee going cold on the counter. It was becoming a ritual now, Lark stepping out first thing with Ash, as if greeting the world on their terms before it tried to define them again. The girl was changing, bit by bit. She still didn't laugh much, still tensed at loud noises, but her steps had rhythm. Her silences felt less like hiding and more like observing. And Ash. He'd transformed too. The bruises along his ribs had faded. His coat had thickened. He no longer moved like a soldier broken in retreat, but like a sentinel returned to duty. The bond between them was no longer survival. It was choice. That day, Clara found Lark in the barn brushing the horses. She'd already mucked the stalls without being told. "You're up early," Clara said. Lark nodded. "Felt like I should be." Clara leaned against the doorway watching her. "I was thinking," Clara said, "about the center." Lark paused, still holding the brush. "The training center." "Yeah, it needs work. Cleaning, repairs. But if I can get the permits reinstated, I could start classes again this spring." Lark set the brush down. "You used to train search and rescue dogs, right?" Clara nodded. "Still do sometimes, but mostly just consult. I used to run programs for teens too, at-risk youth kids who needed direction." Lark turned cautious curiosity in her eyes. "You think I could help?" "I was hoping you'd ask." That afternoon, Clara showed her the old training files, obstacle course layouts, handler commands, sent exercises. Lark soaked it up like sunlight. They spent the rest of the day in the training yard behind the barn. Clara dragged out a few of the old jumps. Nothing too tall, just enough to see how Ash responded. "He's not just a pet," Lark said, gripping the leash. "No," Clara agreed. "He never was." They started small. Sit, stay, heel. Ash obeyed with perfect timing. Then Clara called out, "Track." Lark hesitated but gave the hand signal Clara had shown her earlier. Ash froze, nose twitching. Then head low, he began to follow a scent line Clara had laid out using a glove hidden beneath straw. He found it in under 30 seconds. Lark looked stunned. Clara smiled. "That's not luck," she said. "That's memory." They returned to the house, sweaty, cold, but buzzing with energy. At dinner, Clara made chili from scratch, the kind that warms more than just your stomach. Lark helped grate the cheese, chopped onions without flinching, and even lit the fire in the wood stove without prompting. When they sat down to eat, Clara said something she hadn't said in a very long time. "I'm proud of you." Lark froze. Then she nodded quietly. "You know, she said, I used to think if I disappeared, no one would notice." Clara set down her spoon. "I notice. The next few weeks passed like pages in a book you don't realize you're reading until you're halfway through. Snowstorms came and went. Clara repaired the busted heater in the training center with the help of an old friend from town. Lark got a library card and checked out a stack of books on canine behavior. One night she asked Clara, "Do you think I could become a trainer someday?" Clara looked at her. "No," she said. Lark's heart sank until Clara added with a smile, "I know you can." Then came the court date. It wasn't a surprise. Clara had filed for temporary guardianship weeks ago, quietly, carefully, with the help of a lawyer from the Rescue Foundation. They kept it low-key, didn't tell Lark until the papers were ready. Lark sat at the kitchen table that morning, eyes wide. "You mean, I'd stay here, if you want to." "And Ash?" Clara raised an eyebrow. "Do you think he's going anywhere without you?" Lark looked down at the quilt still folded on the chair nearby, the one her mom had sewn with the stars. The same one she'd given up that night in the alley. Now it smelled like pine and home. "I do want to stay," she whispered. The hearing wasn't dramatic. A judge in a quiet courthouse. A state worker who'd seen the report. A folder filled with witness letters from Dr. Sam from the vet tech who'd treated Ash, even from a mail carrier who'd noticed how much safer that kid looks every day. At the end, the judge looked over her glasses and said, "I think this one takes care of itself." And just like that, Lark Bennett became part of a household again. Not a case number, not a lost file, a daughter. That weekend, they celebrated in the most Clara way possible. No big party, no streamers, just a bonfire behind the barn, warm blankets, bowls of chili, and all 5 dogs lying in a circle at their feet. Clara handed Lark a small box. Inside was a pendant silver, shaped like a star. On the back it read, "Fly again, little Lark." "I had it made," Clara said. "Figured it was time you had something of your own again." Lark clutched at her, eyes shining. Ash nudged her gently, then lay his head across her lap. She looked up at the stars, real ones, scattered across the Arizona sky, and smiled. 1 month later, Clara stood at the edge of the training yard, clipboard in hand. Lark ran the first real test course since the fire. The hound with the crooked ear made it through the tunnel. The retrievers hit the scent markers. Even the oldest lab trotted up the ramp like a champion. Ash moved beside them like he was born for it. Because he was. When it was over, Clara blew the whistle. "Good job, team," she called. Lark turned red-faced and grinning. "You saw that?" "Sure did," Clara said, smiling. "They'd follow you anywhere." I finally get it now," Lark said. "Get what?" "What family feels like." Spring didn't come in a rush. It crept in, slowly melting snowdrifts, inch by inch, teasing green buds from bare branches, sending birds fluttering through skies that had been quiet for too long. It was the kind of spring that took its time, like it knew how much had to thaw beneath the surface. Lark Bennett stood at the edge of the training yard, clipboard in hand, a whistle looped around her neck. She wore boots that had finally molded to her feet and a faded hoodie with the logo of the Arizona K9 Response Corps, a hoodie Clara had found in a trunk and washed just for her. Ash was at her side, tail low, eyes sharp. They weren't just girl and dog anymore. They were partners, and today they had something to prove. The town had started paying attention. Not in the way people stare at a girl in mismatched clothes or whisper about the one who never talks. This was different. They'd heard the stories how the girl in the alley with the dog had saved 3 animals from a fire, how she'd stood her ground against boys with knives, how she'd rebuilt her life out of scraps and silence. And now the town was curious. That afternoon, the Frosted Bean Cafe was hosting a fundraiser for the K9 Rehab Center Clara had reopened. It wasn't fancy, just hot coffee, homemade cookies, and an open demonstration for anyone who wanted to see what those dogs could really do. Clara stood beside the kennels with Dr. Sam watching as the first families trickled in, mothers with toddlers, college students holding iced lattes, retired couples in windbreakers. Lark watched them too. She didn't hide. She adjusted the agility markers, checked Ash's gear, and took a breath. She was ready. The first demonstration was simple. Ash ran the obstacle course in under 40 seconds, up ramps, over hurdles, through tunnels. When he reached the final post, he turned and sat at attention, tongue lolling just enough to look proud. The crowd clapped. A few kids who'd been holding stuffed animals began to cheer. Next came scent tracking. Lark held up a glove, let Ash sniff it, and then gave him a command so quiet only he heard. He was off. He zigzagged through the field, nose low, tail still, found the hidden pouch under a hay bale in 22 seconds flat. The applause was louder this time. Clara watched from the side, arms crossed, eyes shining. "She's the real deal," Sam said under her breath. Clara nodded. "Told you." After the event, people lingered. A man in a sheriff's uniform approached Clara and introduced himself as Deputy Rains. He'd been stationed in Prescott until recently and had heard about the new K-9 work up north. "I'm looking to restart our search and rescue unit," he said. "I could use someone who knows what they're doing." "You mean me or her?" Clara asked, nodding toward Lark. "Both," he said. They shook on it. That evening, Lark helped Clara store the equipment. Ash napped nearby, tail occasionally thudding against the porch boards. As they stacked cones in the barn, Lark paused. "Do you think I'll ever be like you?" Clara didn't answer right away. She wiped her hands on her jeans and leaned against the wall. "No," she said. Lark's face fell. Then Clara smiled. "I think you'll be better." Over the next month, life settled into something resembling rhythm. Lark started attending school 2 days a week, an alternative program downtown that focused on project learning and small classes. At first, she hated it. Too many people. Too many questions. But then on her second day, a boy named Levi asked if he could sit with her at lunch. He didn't talk much, which helped. He had a notebook filled with sketches of wolves and dragons. Lark liked that. By week 3, she was bringing Ash to class once a week as part of a presentation on service animals. The first time she stood in front of the class, her hands shook. Her voice wavered. But when Ash laid down beside her, calm and quiet and completely hers, she took a deep breath and told her story. She didn't start with the alley. She started with the stars on the quilt. And somehow that was enough. Meanwhile, the training center gained momentum. Clara began fielding calls from surrounding counties, local firefighters, trail rescue teams, even a few therapy centers, looking for canine-assisted therapy animals. And Lark She became the unofficial assistant trainer. She set up courses, organized supplies, took notes during evaluations. People started calling her the girl with the hero dog. But more and more, they just called her Lark, and that meant everything. Then one Saturday morning, something unexpected happened. Clara received a letter from the state. It was from the Office of Family Services. Lark's case had been reviewed for permanent guardianship. But the letter wasn't just confirmation. It included something else. A sealed envelope marked for Lark Bennett from the family archive. Clara handed it to her after dinner. Lark sat on the porch swing, the quilt wrapped around her shoulders, the envelope in her lap. She didn't open it right away. She traced her name with one finger, listened to the crickets chirp, watched Ash chase a moth through the grass. Then finally she broke the seal. Inside was a photograph, her mother June standing on a beach Lark barely remembered. Her arms were open, her eyes were closed. Ash, still a pup, sat beside her, tongue out, ears too big for his head. On the back of the photo were the words, "You are loved, wherever you are. Come home when you're ready." Lark didn't cry, but she held that photo like something sacred and whispered to the stars above, "I'm already home." 1 week later, the rescue center hosted its first youth program. It was small, just 6 kids from the local middle school. Some quiet, some loud, some still wearing bruises you couldn't see. Lark stood beside Clara as they introduced the dogs. She didn't speak at first, just watched. Then one girl, maybe 10, with sleeves pulled too far over her hands, reached out to pet Ash. "He's so calm," the girl whispered. "He wasn't always," Lark replied. The girl looked up. "Really?" Lark nodded. "But calm isn't something you're born with. It's something you learn when someone makes you feel safe." The girl smiled, and in that moment Lark knew. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was helping others find their own way out of the storm. That night, Clara wrote in her journal for the first time in years. "I used to think rescue was about saving lives. Now I know it's about restoring them. Sometimes the ones you rescue end up saving you right back." Lark and Ash didn't just come here looking for safety. They came looking for purpose. And somehow we found ours again too. Maybe love is just that simple. 2 survivors, 1 chance, and a whole new beginning. The morning sky stretched pale and open above Flagstaff, the kind of blue that only shows up after weeks of gray. Spring had finally taken root, and the scent of pine and wet soil drifted through the training yard. Lark was already outside. She didn't need an alarm anymore. Her body woke up before sunrise now, like it knew there were dogs to feed, stalls to clean, courses to set up. Ash was always a few paces behind her, his gait steady, his eyes alert. The winter weight had melted off both of them. "Let's go, partner," she whispered, clipping on his harness. Today was a big day. Clara had signed them up to do a joint demo at the town's first responder fair, a small but important community event where police, fire, EMS, and animal rescue teams would gather in the square to showcase tools, answer questions, and build trust with the public. It was the kind of event Lark once would have hidden from. Too many eyes. Too many chances to get asked questions she didn't want to answer. But now, she felt different. Not fearless exactly, but capable. Capable of showing up. Capable of being seen. By 10 a.m., the town square was buzzing. Children darted between booths with painted faces. Vendors handed out popcorn and hot cocoa. A search and rescue helicopter did lazy loops overhead, its blades thudding like a heartbeat above the music from the local high school jazz band. Clara parked the truck around back and let Lark and Ash out by the demo field. Their corner of the fair had agility equipment, scent workstations, and a few shaded crates where retired service dogs rested happily, receiving head scratches from passersby. Lark wore a polo shirt with the K9 unit logo stitched over her heart. It was a size too big, but she liked the way it felt, like she belonged to something bigger than just herself. Ash sat quietly beside her, his vest snug, his eyes scanning the crowd with trained calm. They were a team now, official even. A deputy from Prescott's SAR team came over to say hello. "You're the girl who found Shadow, right?" Lark blinked. I guess. "He's a legend in our circles," the man said, nodding toward Ash. "Everyone thought he was gone. You must have done something right." Lark looked down at Ash, who leaned into her leg like he already knew what was being said. "I didn't find him," she said quietly. "He found me." Their demo was scheduled for noon. Clara gave the opening speech warm and direct as always. Then she stepped back and handed the floor to Lark. She froze for a second. All those eyes, all that quiet. Then she took a breath, stepped forward, and spoke into the mic. "My name is Lark Bennett. This is Ash. Some people call him a miracle dog. Some call him a survivor. But to me, he's family." She paused, let the quiet settle. "When I met him, I didn't even know what a second chance looked like. I just knew what it felt like to be cold and hungry and scared. I gave him my last blanket, and somehow, he gave me everything else." She turned to Ash, gave a subtle hand signal. He sat perfectly still. She continued, "We've trained together for 5 months now. Ash isn't just a rescue, he's a responder, a protector, and the reason I'm standing here today." She nodded. Ash searched. He bolted forward, not wild, but controlled, focused. He followed Clara's scent marker from earlier in the day, weaving through cones, dipping beneath a ramp, and stopping dead center at the foot of a seated volunteer, planted to simulate a missing person. He sat, then looked back. The crowd burst into applause. Lark grinned at cheeks red but eyes bright. She didn't just belong here, she'd earned it. After the fair, something changed. People began stopping Clara at the grocery store. Not to ask about her dogs, to ask about Lark. "Was that your daughter at the demo? That girl's got something special. Does she do private sessions?" Clara would smile, humble as always, but inside something bloomed. Because for years she'd wrestled with what she had lost: her sister, her purpose, her legacy. But now, she saw it every morning in the way Lark walked across the yard, in the way Ash's ears lifted when she spoke, in the way Lark's name was no longer whispered but spoken with admiration. She wasn't just a girl with a tragic past anymore. She was a girl with a future. One Saturday, a woman named Gina brought her son Nolan to the center. Nolan was 9, with deep brown eyes and a stutter that made school feel like a battlefield. He barely spoke when they arrived, hid behind his mom, wouldn't look anyone in the eye. Lark didn't push. She let him stand by the gate watching. After an hour, she sat cross-legged in the grass and let Ash lie beside her. She didn't call Nolan over, didn't ask questions, just started brushing Ash's coat. 10 minutes later, Nolan sat down beside her. Didn't speak, but reached out. Brushed the dog's fur. 2 weeks later, he was laughing while Ash chased a tennis ball across the yard. 3 weeks later, he asked Lark how to teach a dog to sit. And when he stuttered, Lark didn't flinch, didn't correct. She just nodded and said, "Take your time." And Nolan beamed. That night, Clara found Lark sitting outside the starry quilt draped over her knees, a pencil in one hand and a notebook in the other. She was writing. "What are you working on?" Clara asked, easing down beside her. Lark hesitated, then handed over the notebook. The first page read, "Training Heroes: What Dogs Teach Us About Healing" by Lark Bennett. Clara blinked. "You're writing a book." "Kind of," Lark said, "more like a guide. For kids like me, and dogs like Ash." Clara handed the notebook back and smiled. "You know what I think?" Lark looked up. "I think you already are the guide." Later that week, a man came by the center asking for help. His father had gone missing 2 days earlier, last seen hiking north of Eldon Lookout Trail. The family had contacted the sheriff's office, but snowfall had made searching difficult. They needed dogs. Fast. Clara suited up immediately. So did Lark. "You sure you're ready for this?" Clara asked as they packed gear into the truck. Lark nodded. We've been ready. The mountains were quiet, eerie in their stillness. Snow crunched beneath boots. Radios buzzed softly. Lark gave Ash the scent from the missing man's glove. Find him, she said. Ash took off, not in a sprint, but in that same measured, deliberate motion he always used. Nose to the ground, ears sharp, purpose humming through every muscle. They found the man 2 hours later, cold, disoriented, and huddled beneath a fallen tree. Alive. When the paramedics took him away, the man grabbed Lark's hand and whispered, "Your dog saved my life." Lark looked at Ash, then back at the man. Actually, she said he saved mine first. The night after the rescue mission, the farmhouse was quiet. Not heavy, not sad, just quiet in the way a place gets after something powerful happens. Like even the walls were breathing slower. Lark sat curled in the oversized chair near the wood stove, legs tucked under her, Ash resting his head across her lap. His eyes were half closed, one ear twitching every so often as the fire cracked. She stroked his fur in long, steady lines, the way Clara had taught her to calm a dog's heart. She wasn't calming his. She was calming hers. Clara moved softly in the kitchen behind her, humming a tune Lark didn't recognize, something half-forgotten and warm. She poured 2 mugs of tea and brought one over, setting it gently on the table beside Lark. "You did good today," Clara said. Lark didn't respond right away, just looked down at Ash, then back up at her. "I didn't think we'd actually find him." "You did more than find him," Clara said. "You brought someone home." Lark's voice was soft. "I remember wishing someone would do that for me." "You found your way anyway," Clara replied. "And now, you're the one showing others the way." That night, Lark dreamed of stars. Not the ones in the sky, the ones on her quilt. But this time, she wasn't cold. She wasn't hiding in an alley. She was holding a leash, and she was walking towards something. Spring deepened into summer, and the K9 Center thrived. Word spread quickly. Requests came in weekly. "Can you evaluate this dog for therapy work? Can you help with a behavioral case? Can you speak to our school about animal-assisted trauma recovery?" Clara fielded the calls. Lark led the sessions. One day, a letter arrived from the State Board of Animal Services. The K9 Center had been nominated for a regional humanitarian award for exceptional community service through Canine Partnership and Youth Mentorship. The letter named both Clara Whitmore and Lark Bennett as co-directors. Clara didn't cry, but she did sit down at the kitchen table and stare at the letter for a long, quiet moment. "I always thought this place would fade after I did," she said, handing it to Lark. "But now, it's just getting started." Lark held the letter in both hands. Her name typed in black ink felt like something real, something earned, something permanent. That summer, Lark did something she never thought she'd do. She spoke at a town hall meeting. The mayor had asked her personally. They were trying to expand mental health support for kids in foster care, and they wanted a voice from someone who'd lived it. She stood on a small platform in front of folding chairs filled with parents, teachers, caseworkers, and neighbors. Clara sat in the front row. Ash lay at her feet, still as ever. Lark's hands shook a little, but her voice didn't. "I'm not here because I got lucky," she said. "I'm here because someone gave me a chance and didn't stop giving it, even when I didn't know how to say thank you." She paused. "And because one dog refused to leave my side." A few people laughed gently. Others wiped their eyes. Lark smiled. "When I needed family, I found it. Not in blood, but in patience, in routine, in feeding dogs, in someone letting me be quiet when I didn't have words, and eventually in someone helping me find my voice again." She looked down at Ash. "I hope we can give more kids that same chance." She walked off the stage to a standing ovation. But the only thing that mattered was when Clara pulled her into a hug and whispered, "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen." In late July, a small package arrived at the center. No return address. Inside, a leather-bound journal, blank except for the first page. In neat handwriting, it read, "For the girl who sings in silence. For the dog who watches over her. Tell your story. People need it." Lark never found out who sent it, but she started writing that very night. The weeks that followed were filled with heat and long days. Lark began working with a new dog, a border collie named Willow, who'd been rescued from a hoarding case. Willow didn't trust anyone, flinched at hands, barked at shadows. "She's like I was," Lark said to Clara one morning. Clara nodded. "That's why she's yours to train." The first few sessions were hard. Willow wouldn't make eye contact, wouldn't eat unless she was alone, wouldn't let anyone clip a leash to her collar without snapping. Lark didn't push. She sat in the kennel every day, just outside Willow's comfort zone, with Ash nearby as a silent example. She read aloud. brought treats, left the gate open. On the 10th day, Willow laid down near her. On the 20th, she took a treat from Lark's hand. By the end of the month, she followed Lark across the yard without a leash. "She'll make a great therapy dog one day," Clara said. Lark smiled. "She already is." In early August, Clara pulled out an old storage bin from the barn. Inside were dozens of photos, her training days with Shadow, her early rescue missions, her sister June, holding a tiny baby with red hair. "Want to help me organize these?" Clara asked. Lark knelt beside her. Together, they sorted memories into piles. Dogs they remembered, some who'd passed, some who'd been adopted, handwritten notes on the back of faded photos. At the bottom of the bin was a framed newspaper clipping from 20 years ago. "Young trainer wins National Canine Award" photo, a 30-something Clara, holding a trophy surrounded by German Shepherds. "You were kind of a big deal," Lark teased. Clara laughed. "I had my moments." Lark looked at the trophy, then at Clara. "Do you miss that version of yourself?" Clara shook her head. "No, I like who I am now better." Lark looked down at the stack of pictures. "Because of me." Clara's voice was soft. "Because of us." By the time summer began to fade, the center had a waiting list. Kids wanted in. Volunteers showed up early. Donations came from as far as Phoenix and Sedona. Lark walked through it all with quiet pride. Not showy, not loud, but certain. She belonged here, not because someone let her, but because she'd made it true. On the night before school started again, Lark sat on the roof above the porch. It was something she did sometimes when she needed space. Clara came out and leaned on the railing below. "Ready for your first full year?" she asked. Lark looked up at the stars. "I think so." "You nervous?" "A little." "Want me to pack your lunch?" Lark laughed. "Only if you don't put any of those weird oat bars in it." "No promises," Clara said. They sat in silence for a minute. Then Lark spoke. "You think Mom would have been proud of me?" Clara looked up. "She already was, from the day you were born." Lark nodded, tears catching in her throat. "I hope I make her proud from here too." "You already are." That night, Lark fell asleep with Ash beside her, the starry quilt pulled up to her chin. And for the first time since the fire, she dreamed not of what she had lost, but of everything she had built. The first week of school came and went like a gust of mountain wind, unexpectedly brisk, but not unwelcome. For the first time in her life, Lark Bennett started the year with a backpack that wasn't borrowed, a schedule she'd helped choose, and a teacher who actually pronounced her name right on the first try. It felt surreal. In the halls, she wasn't invisible anymore. Some kids still whispered she'd been that girl in the alley after all, but most just knew her as the dog girl. A few classmates even asked if she gave training tips. Lark didn't mind, because being the dog girl was more than enough. At the end of the second week, her English teacher gave them an unusual assignment. "Write about where you come from," she said. "Not just geography. I want the real story, your truth. You can write it as a poem, a letter, a scene, whatever feels most honest." Lark blinked at the paper. Her first instinct was to push the idea away. Too raw, too dangerous. What if she messed it up? But later that night, sitting by the wood stove with Ash's head resting across her feet, she pulled out her leather-bound journal and began to write. She didn't start with the fire. She started with the blanket. "I come from a quilt with stars, sewn by a woman who told me I'd fly someday. I come from silence, and then from a growl. I come from the dog who didn't leave me. The woman who opened her door without asking for a story first. I come from a place that didn't exist until I helped build it. And now, I come from strength." When she turned it in, her teacher returned it with a note. "You are the story others will remember. Keep telling it." Back at the center, things were growing faster than Clara ever imagined. A new shed had been donated by a local contractor for additional supplies. 2 new volunteers signed up, both high school students with an interest in animal psychology. And most exciting of all, a local nonprofit had offered to sponsor the first ever youth canine leadership camp, hosted right at the Center for Foster Teens across northern Arizona. It would be a week-long program, 6 teens, 6 dogs, and a curriculum built around responsibility, trust building, and personal healing through canine partnership. Clara turned to Lark the day the proposal came in and asked simply, "Want to help me lead it?" Lark didn't hesitate. "Absolutely." In the weeks leading up to the camp, Lark worked harder than she ever had. She helped prep training stations, test obstacle courses, rewrite lesson plans, and assemble welcome packets. Clara noticed something. The girl who once flinched at eye contact now introduced herself with a steady handshake. The girl who once mumbled barely a sentence now explained tracking theory to volunteers. The girl who once thought she didn't belong anywhere now ran the show. The camp began in mid-September, just as the leaves were starting to turn. The 6 teens arrived on a cloudy Sunday morning. They were quiet, closed off. Each came with a caseworker and a duffel bag full of questions they weren't ready to ask. Lark recognized the looks in their eyes. She remembered what it felt like to walk into a place expecting it to disappoint you. She didn't give them speeches. She gave them dogs. Each teen was paired with a rescue dog based on energy, temperament, and need. Lark herself matched them. She had spent weeks studying every file, every video, every behavioral note. By the end of the first day, one boy, Carlos, was brushing his dog's coat while humming a song in Spanish. By the end of the second day, a girl named Brooklyn had taught her pup to sit, shake, and roll over. And by the third day, they were all laughing. Not all the time, not loudly, but it was enough. Each night, Lark walked the perimeter of the property with Ash at her side, flashlight in hand, checking the runs, making sure every kennel door was latched, every porch light turned off. Clara joined her one evening and watched as Lark paused by Willow's pen. The once nervous collie now slept soundly beside a new trainee dog. "She doesn't shake anymore," Lark said softly. "She had someone who believed in her," Clara replied. "So did I," Lark said, glancing up, twice. The night before the final day of camp, they held a small graduation ceremony in the barn. No balloons, no speeches, just a picnic table covered in cupcakes, paper certificates with paw prints, and 6 dogs who sat beside 6 kids who looked lighter. Not fixed, not healed, but lighter. When it came time for a closing message, Clara nudged Lark forward. She stood nervous at first until Ash moved beside her and sat like always facing the group with gentle focus. "I used to think I didn't have anything to say," Lark said, "but I've learned that sometimes the right dog helps you find the words." She looked around the room. "You've all done something amazing this week. You trusted, you showed up, you worked hard, and now you get to go home with proof that you can build something better starting with yourself." Then she smiled just a little. "I used to be where you are, and now I'm still figuring it out. But I know this, none of us are alone if we don't want to be." And that was enough. After the camp ended, Lark returned to school and found a note waiting in her locker. It wasn't signed. It just said, "Thanks for not talking down to us. You made it okay to be quiet." She folded it carefully and tucked it into her journal between the page about the quilt and the one about the first time Ash barked at danger. She added a new line that night: "You don't have to be loud to lead." Clara came down with the flu that October. It wasn't serious, but it knocked her off her feet for nearly 2 weeks. Lark ran the center almost entirely on her own. She organized feeding schedules, coordinated check-ins with volunteers, handled supply deliveries, and even answered an interview request from the local paper. The reporter asked, "So what do you hope people understand about this place?" Lark thought for a moment. That healing isn't linear, and love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just a dog sitting beside you when no one else does. By Halloween, the dogs were dressed in costume for the town's annual Paws and Pumpkins event. Ash wore a homemade superhero cape stitched from an old flannel shirt. Lark painted tiny gold stars on his vest. The kids came in droves. And for the first time, Lark wasn't just introducing dogs or organizing activities. She was welcoming people in, to her space, to her story, to her legacy. The first snow came earlier than expected. It wasn't much, just a dusting across the rooftops and fence lines, but it stuck. Enough to make the pines sparkle, enough for Ash's paw prints to appear like little stars along the porch. Enough for Lark to wake up early, wrap herself in a blanket, and sit on the steps with a steaming mug between her palms just watching it fall. A year ago, she'd been in an alley shivering under this same blanket. Now she was home. Clara joined her a few minutes later, stepping outside in wool socks and a flannel that had definitely seen better days. "Thought I'd find you here," she said. Lark smiled softly. Didn't want to miss the first snow. Ash trotted down the porch and into the yard, nose twitching, as he investigated the white fluff gathering on the tall grass. "Remember last winter," Clara said, easing herself onto the step beside her. "I remember everything." They sat in silence for a while, watching Ash chase a snowflake and bark once sharp and playful. Then Clara reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "What's this?" "A letter," Clara said. "It came yesterday, from the adoption office." Lark froze. She'd already been living with Clara for over a year now. Papers had been filed, guardianship granted. But this was different. This was forever. She opened the envelope. Her full name was printed in black ink. Lark Whitmore. No hyphen, no parentheses, no case number. Just a name. Just hers. Her throat tightened. "Are you okay with that?" Clara asked gently. Lark looked up. Her eyes sparkled with unshed tears. "I've never had a name that didn't feel borrowed." Clara wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Well, this one's yours now, for good." The next few weeks felt like breathing for the first time after a long run, deep and surprising, and a little bit painful, but real. The town held a winter fundraiser, and the K-9 Center hosted an open house. Kids from school brought their parents. Volunteers donated coats and toys. Even Deputy Rains dropped off a dozen high-visibility dog vests embroidered with Team Lark and Ash. By December, Ash was officially certified as a therapy dog and search partner. Lark framed his certificate and hung it in the center hallway, right beneath a photo of her mother holding a baby in a yellow blanket. When Clara saw it, she didn't say anything, just placed a hand over Lark's and stood beside her for a long time. Christmas came with snowdrifts and peppermint cocoa, and a tree in the front room that Lark decorated with ornaments made from felt twine and bottle caps. One night, while they sat watching It's a Wonderful Life, Clara handed Lark a small wrapped box. Inside was a leather collar. The tag read, "Ash found, loved, home." Lark looked at the tag for a long moment, then leaned over and whispered into Ash's ear, "You did that for me too." On New Year's Eve, the rescue team was called out. A car had slid off a rural road and the driver, a young woman, was unaccounted for. Clara and Lark were both certified now. They suited up, clipped Ash's harness, and joined the night search. The air was sharp wind, carrying snow sideways through the dark woods. Lark crouched beside Ash and offered him a scarf with the woman's scent. He sniffed it, turned toward the tree line, and took off with focus like a blade. They found her 2 hours later, clinging to a tree root near a ravine's edge, half-conscious, lips blue. Ash barked once urgent, clear. Clara radioed it in. By dawn, the woman was stable. Her family hugged Lark like she was their own. "You saved her," the woman's mother cried. "God bless you." Lark didn't say much, just knelt beside Ash and scratched behind his ears. "He did most of the work," she said with a quiet smile. That night back at home, Lark stood out in the yard while Clara made hot soup. She looked up at the stars. She didn't count them. There were too many now. And for the first time, she didn't feel like she was reaching for something she'd lost. She felt like the sky had reached back. The next morning, Clara called her into the office. "I got an email this morning," she said, "from the University of Northern Arizona." Lark tilted her head. "You applied to something?" "No," Clara said. "You did." Lark blinked. Clara grinned and slid her a printed email. "Congratulations, Lark Whitmore. You've been accepted into our youth veterinary program for early college enrollment." Lark stared at the words. "But how?" "You applied," Clara said again. "You wrote that essay about rescue dogs and trauma therapy and sent it in. Don't look so surprised. You earned this." Lark covered her mouth. Ash trotted into the room, sensing the moment, and pressed his head against her leg. Clara smiled. "Looks like you're going to be a vet one day, huh?" Lark looked up. Her voice was steady. "Yeah, I think I will." On the anniversary of the night she first found Ash in the alley, Lark walked back there. She didn't go alone. Clara drove her partway. Ash walked the rest with her. The alley hadn't changed much, still quiet, still forgotten. She stood in the exact corner where she'd curled up with a blanket and nothing else. And she left something behind. A second quilt. This one stitched with stars and a message in the corner. For whoever needs it next. Dear reader, if you followed this story all the way to the end, thank you. This wasn't just a story about a girl and a dog. It was a story about how love doesn't always come where we expect it. About how family is sometimes built, not born. About how healing can take time and courage often comes quietly. But above all, it's about second chances. Because whether you're a girl in an alley, a dog with nowhere left to go, or someone watching from afar, you are not forgotten, and you are not alone. Let me ask you something. Was there ever a moment in your life when someone, human or animal, showed up when you needed them most? We'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below, share this video if it touched your heart, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Heroes for Animals, for more stories of hope, healing, and the powerful bond between people and their dogs. From our family to yours, thank you, and may you always know. Sometimes the ones we rescue are the ones who save us.